He threw the first punch right there in aisle A, between the heirloom tomatoes priced at $7 a pound. I didn't fall not because I was stronger, but because I knew the cameras at booth 42 were recording from 3 angles. He thought this was his market, and I was just some weekend helper earning extra cash. He had no idea the permits, insurance, and cash flow accounts were all in my name. My name is Lena Hart, and I've been running the compliance department at Northline Civic Co-op for 3 years, but on weekends, you'll find me at the Marion Ridge Farmers Market, managing my booth, Shade and Soil, where I sell organic produce and seedlings. It's more than a side hustle. It's my sanctuary, my connection to something real after 5 days of regulatory paperwork and audit trails. That Saturday morning started like any other. The October air carried that sharp edge that makes Carolina Valley famous for its autumn markets. I'd been up since 4, loading crates of butternut squash and late-season tomatoes into my van. My left shoulder ached, an old injury from years of hauling inventory, but the familiar rhythm of setting up my booth always made the pain fade. Dale Mercer showed up at 7:23 a.m. I know the exact time because I just processed my first sale on the POS system the co-op provides all vendors. He emerged from the crowd like a storm cloud, his face already twisted with that particular rage I'd learned to recognize over the 12 years he'd been married to my mother. "You ungrateful little—" He stopped himself, scanning the early morning shoppers. Dale always cared about appearances. "We need to talk, now." I continued arranging the heirloom tomatoes, each one a small work of art. "I'm working, Dale. Whatever it is can wait." "Don't you dare dismiss me." His voice dropped to that dangerous register. "Your mother is heartbroken. All I asked for was a simple signature, a cosign for the business loan. Family helps family. Lena." The business was his latest scheme, a clean food startup that existed only in his imagination and on the letterhead he'd printed at Kinko's. Last week it was food trucks. Before that, a supplement company, each venture requiring just a small loan, just a little help from family. "I already told you no." I met his eyes, keeping my voice steady despite the way my hands wanted to shake. "I won't co-sign anything." That's when he grabbed my arm, fingers digging into the exact spot where the old injury lived. The pain shot through me like electricity, but I didn't cry out. Instead, I noted the position of the security cameras. Booth 42 had 3 angles, and the market's main security feed covered the center aisle. "You think you're better than us." He shook me once, hard. "Living in your fancy apartment while your mother struggles." My mother, Janice Mercer, who hadn't worked a day since marrying Dale. My mother, who called me crying about bills while wearing new jewelry. My mother, who stood 30 feet away pretending to examine green beans while her husband's grip left bruises on her daughter's arm. "Let go," I said it quietly, but Mrs. Fan at the next booth heard. She looked up from her flowers, concern creasing her face. Dale must have sensed the attention. He released me with a shove that sent me stumbling into my tomato display. That's when he threw the punch, a quick jab that caught my ribs and knocked the wind out of me. $7 heirloom tomatoes scattered across the asphalt. "Security." Mrs. Fan's voice cut through the morning air. Marcus, the market security coordinator, appeared within seconds. Dale stepped back, hands raised in mock innocence. "Just a family discussion. No harm done." I straightened slowly, one hand pressed to my ribs. With the other, I pulled out my phone and took 3 photos: the scattered tomatoes, Dale's retreating form, the small crowd of witnesses. "You okay, Lena?" Marcus asked, his hand on his radio. "I'm fine." I wasn't, but I had work to do. "Could you write up an incident report, standard procedure?" Dale laughed, that bitter sound I'd heard too many times. "Incident report for what? I barely touched you." But he didn't know about the cameras. He didn't know about the digital paper trail I'd been creating since I turned 18. Most importantly, he didn't know that every vendor at this market had to submit permits, insurance documentation, and sign a code of conduct that specifically addressed harassment and violence. As security escorted him out, I began collecting the ruined tomatoes. My ribs throbbed. My shoulder screamed. But my mind was clear. Dale Mercer had finally made his mistake in the one place where I held all the cards my market, my booth, my domain. The morning sun climbed higher, and I reopened for business. But something had shifted. This wasn't just about a signature anymore. This was about patterns and paper trails, about the difference between what happens in private and what happens in front of 3 security cameras and 17 witnesses. I processed another sale, smiled at a regular customer, and made a mental note to check my old email account when I got home. Something told me Dale's loan applications were just the beginning. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a bag of frozen peas pressed against my ribs and my laptop open to an email account I rarely checked anymore. The address, Lenahart 2919, valleymail.com, was a relic from my first apartment, back when I thought distance from my mother meant safety from Dale's schemes. The inbox showed 47 unread messages. Most were spam, but 3 subject lines made my blood run cold. Valley First Trust, account overdraft notice. Valley First Trust, final warning, loan payment overdue. Valley First Trust, account frozen due to default. My hands trembled as I opened the most recent one. According to Valley First Trust, I had co-signed a business loan for $45,000 6 months ago. The account was now frozen due to non-payment, and collection proceedings would begin within 10 business days. I had never banked with Valley First Trust. I had never signed any loan documents. The attached PDF showed a signature that looked like mine, close enough to fool anyone who didn't look carefully, but I recognized it immediately. It was my signature from a lease agreement I'd signed in 2019, the apartment rental that had required my mother as a guarantor, the same document Dale would have had access to through my mother's files. I pulled my credit report at 11:47 p.m. The familiar ritual of entering security questions felt different now, each keystroke heavy with dread. When the report loaded, I found 2 hard inquiries I didn't recognize, both from Valley First Trust. The addresses listed for the applications weren't mine. They were my mother's house in the Riverside district. My phone rang. "Mom." "Honey, I heard about what happened at the market today." Her voice was carefully neutral, the way it got when she was navigating between Dale and me. "He didn't mean it. You know how stressed he's been with the business." "Mom, did mail from Valley First Trust come to your house with my name on it?" Silence. "Then I don't know what you're talking about." "Mom," I kept my voice steady, professional, the tone I used for compliance investigations at work. "This is serious. Did you see any bank documents with my name?" "Dale handles all the financial stuff. You know I don't understand those things." But there was something in her voice, a tremor that told me she knew exactly what I was talking about. My mother, who balanced her checkbook to the penny before Dale came along, suddenly didn't understand financial documents. "I have to go," I said. "But Mom, if you have any documents with my signature, you need to keep them safe. This is going to be a legal matter." The next morning was Sunday, but I was at my desk at Northline Civic Co-op by 7. The building was empty except for security, but I needed access to resources and witnesses to my process. Working on a Sunday, Myra appeared in my doorway with 2 cups of coffee. As head of internal audit, she had the same habit of weekend work when something didn't smell right. Personal matter that might become a criminal one. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Identity theft, forged signatures on loan documents. Myra's expression sharpened. "Family." "How did you know?" "It's always family. They know enough to be dangerous but assume love means you won't prosecute." She pulled up a chair. "What's your documentation chain?" I showed her what I had: the emails, the credit report, photos of the signature comparison. Myra studied them with the focus that made her legendary in compliance circles. "You need the original documents from the bank," she said. "Schedule an appointment with their fraud department, not just customer service. Bring a witness, someone who can attest to your real signature. And Lena." She met my eyes. "Start the police report now. Paper trail is everything." By noon, I had an appointment with Marcus Hale, the loan officer at Valley First Trust's downtown branch, I'd also called Noah Pierce, my half-brother from my father's first marriage. We weren't close too many years and too much geography between us, but he was a notary public and had examples of my real signature on legal documents from our grandmother's estate. "Jesus, Lena," Noah said when I explained. "Dale actually forged your signature, Mom knows. She knows something, maybe not the full extent." I stared at the evidence spread across my table. The rejection letters would have gone to her house. She had to have seen them. "You pressing charges." "I'm building a case. Difference is important." That afternoon, Teo from IT helped me create a digital evidence folder with hash verification every document, every email, every timestamp preserved with cryptographic proof of when I'd accessed it. "You're going full forensic on this," he observed. "Dale thinks I'm still the 18-year-old who ran away from home with nothing but a backpack," I said. "He doesn't know I've spent the last decade learning how systems work, how fraud gets detected, how paper trails lead to handcuffs." The frozen peas had melted, and my ribs painted new bruises across my torso, but pain was just data, now evidence of escalation. Proof that Dale was getting desperate. The physical attack at the market wasn't random. He knew the walls were closing in. I created a timeline on my whiteboard, loan application submitted. Rejection letters sent to Mom's address. Dale's demands for co-signature. The attack at the market. Each point connected with red string like a detective's murder board, except this was about killing trust, not a person. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have just signed the papers. D." I screenshotted it immediately, added it to the evidence folder. Dale had just made mistake number 2. Digital threats leave permanent records. Outside my office window, Marion Ridge prepared for another week. Somewhere in Riverside, my mother was probably making Dale's favorite pot roast, pretending everything was normal. But normal was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. Tomorrow, I would walk into Valley First Trust with a notary, a witness, and enough documentation to start an avalanche. Dale thought he knew who I was, the quiet girl who sold vegetables on weekends, who wouldn't make waves in the family. He was about to learn that the girl who ran away at 18 had grown up into someone far more dangerous, a compliance officer with subpoena power and a very personal understanding of fraud. Valley First Trust's downtown branch occupied a corner building that tried too hard to look both historic and modern. Marcus Hale met us in a conference room that smelled like leather and old money. He was younger than I'd expected, with the kind of careful precision that suggested he'd seen enough fraud to be permanently suspicious. "Ms. Hart?" He arranged 3 folders on the table. "I've pulled the complete file as requested. Before we begin, I need to verify your identity." I handed over my driver's license, passport, and 2 work IDs. Noah presented his notary credentials and the estate documents bearing my verified signature. Marcus compared them methodically, using a magnifying glass on the signatures. "The loan application was submitted online on April 15th, he began, opening the first folder. "The IP address traces to a residential location in Riverside District. My mother's house." I kept my expression neutral. "The signature was uploaded as a scanned document." He slid a paper across the table. "This is what we received." I studied it with the same detachment I'd use for any compliance investigation. The signature was mine, but not mine lifted from something else, digitally placed on the loan form. Around the edges, if you looked closely, you could see slight pixelation where the copy job wasn't perfect. "This is from a 2019 lease agreement," I said, pulling out my comparison document. "See the exact same ink blob on the tail of the T, the same microscopic break in the A. It's not just similar, it's identical. That's impossible with a real signature." Marcus nodded, making notes. The loan was approved initially for $45,000, deposited into a business checking account for Mercer Provisions, LLC. "I've never heard of that company." "It was registered with the state 3 days before the loan application." He opened the second folder. "The registration lists you as CFO and Dale Mercer as CEO." My stomach dropped, but I kept taking notes. Each piece of evidence was another nail in Dale's coffin. Within 2 weeks, The entire amount was withdrawn via a series of checks and transfers. The account was then abandoned. No loan payments were ever made. Where did the rejection letters go? Noah asked. That's where it gets interesting. Marcus pulled out a stack of certified mail receipts. We sent 4 letters to the address on file, your mother's residence. All were signed for by J. Mercer. Janice, my mother had signed for letters about fraud in my name and said nothing. I need copies of everything, I said. Certified copies for law enforcement. Already prepared. Marcus slid a thick envelope across the table. Ms. Hart, I've been doing this for 12 years. This is one of the cleaner cases of identity theft I've seen. The perpetrator made several amateur mistakes. After the bank, Noah and I walked to the county courthouse. The records room smelled like dust and old paper, but everything was digitized now. The clerk, a woman named Dolores who'd probably seen every kind of legal drama, helped us navigate the system. Mercer Provisions, LLC, she read from her screen. Incorporated April 12th. Dissolved. That's interesting. It was administratively dissolved last month for failure to file required reports. Can we get the articles of incorporation? Honey, you can get everything. Public record. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Business address listed as 1547 Riverside Drive. My mother's house, again. The signature on the incorporation documents, I said. Can you zoom in? There it was, my forged signature as CFO, agreeing to terms I'd never seen for a company I'd never heard of. But Dale had made a mistake. He'd dated it April 12th, when I had been at a compliance conference in Atlanta with 200 witnesses. Noah, I need you to notarize an affidavit about my whereabouts that day. Already thinking like a prosecutor, he said with something like pride. We spent another hour pulling documents. Dale had been busy. There were applications for business credit cards, a failed attempt at an equipment loan, even a filing for a fictitious business name that never went through, each one with my forged signature, each one a separate count of fraud. Why did he think he'd get away with this? Noah asked, as we organized copies in my car. Because in his world, family doesn't sue family. Because Mom would guilt me into dropping it. Because he's gotten away with smaller things for years. I touched my still tender ribs. The attack at the market. That was panic. He knows I'm on to him. Lena, Noah's voice was serious. You need to know something. I got a call from Ray last week. Ray, our father, who'd left when I was 7 and Noah was 15, who sent birthday cards with money but never visited. What did he want? To warn me. Apparently Dale tried to get him to co-sign something last year. Used your name. Said you were too proud to ask directly. Ray smelled bullshit and declined. But he kept the emails. Another piece of evidence. Another person Dale had tried to exploit using my name. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence boxes, building my case like a prosecutor. The criminal charges were clear identity theft, wire fraud, forgery. The civil suit would be harder but potentially more satisfying unjust enrichment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. My phone rang. Mom again. Lena, honey, can we talk? Dale's gone out, and I need to tell you something. Did you know about the loan, Mom? A long pause. The letters came. I saw them. But Dale said it was a misunderstanding. That you'd agreed to help but were having second thoughts. He said he'd handle it. Mom, he forged my signature. He stole my identity. That's a federal crime. You don't understand the pressure he's been under. The business. There is no business. The words exploded out of me. There's never been a business. There's just scam after scam. And now he's dragged me into it. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't commit fraud. Family doesn't attack you at your workplace. I took a breath, found my professional voice again. I'm filing charges tomorrow, criminal and civil. If you have any documents, any evidence, now's the time to preserve them. She was crying now. Lena, please, think about what this will do to us. Dale thought about that when he committed fraud in my name. I'm done protecting him. And Mom, if you destroy any evidence, that's obstruction of justice. That's a crime too. I hung up and went back to my timeline. Tomorrow, I'd file the police report. Next week, I'd serve papers. But first, I had a farmer's market to run and a plan to execute. Dale thought the market was his territory, neutral ground where he could intimidate me. He had no idea that every vendor there was required to submit documentation to maintain their booth. No idea that the market's governing board took fraud very seriously. No idea that the market he'd attacked me in was about to become his worst nightmare. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. I arrived at the market at 4 a.m., 2 hours before my usual setup time. The space was empty except for Jorge, the overnight security guard who knew every vendor by name. Early morning. Lena, everything okay? Just need to check some administrative stuff with market management before we open. The Marion Ridge Farmers Market wasn't just a collection of tents and tables. It was a sophisticated operation. Every vendor submitted EIN numbers, liability insurance, health permits for food handlers. The market board ran background checks, verified business licenses, maintained digital records of every transaction through the centralized POS system. I made my way to the market office, a converted shipping container painted cheerful green. Inside, I pulled up the vendor database on the management terminal. My fingers moved with practiced efficiency. Shade and soil appeared on screen with all my documentation in perfect order, but I wasn't looking for my own records. A search for Mercer brought up 3 results. 2 were legitimate vendors from previous years. The third made my blood run cold. Mercer Provisions LLC had attempted to register for a vendor spot 6 months ago. Status denied. Failed business verification. Dale had tried to use the forged company to get a booth at my market. I photographed the screen, then dug deeper. The application included a tax ID number, insurance documentation, and a signature mine. Forged again. But the market's verification process had caught discrepancies. The insurance policy number didn't match the carrier's format. The address didn't match city zoning for commercial food preparation. The market had protected me without even knowing it. Finding everything you need. Brantley Quinn stood in the doorway, coffee in hand despite the early hour. The former market manager still volunteered as a safety advisor, her silver hair pulled back in the same practical bun she'd worn for 30 years. Mrs. Quinn, yes, I'm documenting some fraud attempts for a police report. Her eyes sharpened. The dust-up last week with that man who hit you. My stepfather. Turns out he's been busier than just throwing punches. She moved to look over my shoulder at the screen. Dale Mercer. I remember him. Tried to strong-arm his way into a premium booth spot. Claimed family connections. When we ran the verification, half his documents were garbage. You kept records. Honey, I keep everything. 30 years in market management teaches you that today's small problem is tomorrow's lawsuit. She pulled out a battered notebook. April 18th. Dale Mercer attempted to pay vendor fees with a credit card that was declined. Became belligerent when asked for alternative payment. April 20th returned with a check from Mercer Provisions LLC that bounced. May 3rd formal denial letter sent. Each entry was dated, timed, initialed, a contemporaneous record that would hold up in court. Could I get a copy of those pages? I'll do you better. I'll write up a formal statement. That man's been nothing but trouble since he started sniffing around here. By 6 a.m., vendors were arriving. I returned to my booth, arranging produce while my mind arranged evidence. The market wasn't just where Dale had attacked me. It was where his entire house of cards could tumble. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at 10 a.m., right when the market hit its Saturday morning peak. She was in plain clothes, just another customer browsing the stalls. But I recognized the way she cataloged everything exits, cameras, potential witnesses. Ms. Hart, interesting choice of meeting location. This is where the physical assault occurred. It's also central to the fraud case. I handed her a folder. The market requires extensive documentation from vendors. Dale tried to use the forged company to get a booth here. Failed. She flipped through the papers, occasionally photographing pages with her phone. The POS system, it tracks everything. Every transaction, time, amount, payment method, linked to vendor ID. I pulled up my vendor app, More importantly, it's all backed up to cloud storage with tamper-proof timestamps. Show me how it works. I ran a sample transaction, demonstrating how the system captured data. If someone tries to use a fraudulent business entity, it gets flagged. If they use a suspicious payment method, there's a record. The market takes financial integrity seriously. Because one bad vendor could destroy everyone's reputation. Exactly. Detective Reeves watched the Saturday crowd flow past, families with wagons, couples debating apple varieties, children darting between stalls. He came after you here on purpose, public humiliation. He didn't realize this is my territory. Every vendor here knows me. Every camera angle is mapped. Every transaction is logged. I gestured to booth 42. Those 3 cameras they upload to secure cloud storage every 5 minutes. The footage from last week has already been preserved under legal hold. She smiled slightly. You've done this before. Compliance officer. I investigate financial irregularities for a living. This time it's just personal. A commotion near the main entrance caught our attention. Dale had arrived, my mother trailing behind him. He wore his salesman's smile, shaking hands, playing the role of supportive family. Several vendors turned away from him. Interesting, Detective Reeves murmured. He's establishing presence, making himself a regular so any future complaints look like retaliation. Except he's about to make a crucial mistake. I checked my phone. Mrs. Quinn sent word to all vendors about last week's incident. Market protocol says anyone involved in documented violence gets 1 warning before permanent suspension. And if he causes another disturbance, immediate removal, permanent ban, full cooperation with law enforcement. I met her eyes, including access to all historical records of attempted fraud. Dale was moving closer, working his way down the aisles. My mother looked miserable, her usual perfect makeup unable to hide the stress lines. When she saw me talking to Detective Reeves, her face went white. Is that? She started to ask Dale. He followed her gaze, and his salesman's smile flickered. He didn't know who Detective Reeves was, but he recognized the type, the way she stood, the way she observed cop was written in every line of her posture. Keep doing what you're doing, Detective Reeves said quietly. I'm just another customer. She picked up a bunch of carrots, examining them with theatrical interest. The fraud case is solid, multiple counts, federal jurisdiction because of the wire transfers, but I want him for the assault too. Makes the whole package stronger. He'll come to my booth. He can't help himself. Good. I'll be at booth 39, clear sight line. She handed me exact change for the carrots. Nice doing business with you, Ms. Hart. As she walked away, I felt the pieces clicking into place. The market wasn't just my weekend business, it was a living, breathing crime scene. Every vendor was a potential witness. Every transaction was evidence. Every camera was an impartial observer. Dale thought he'd beaten me down last week, established dominance in a public space. He had no idea he'd actually walked into a trap that had been set the moment he forged my signature on that first document. The morning sun climbed higher, and the market hummed with life. Somewhere in the crowd, a detective pretended to shop for vegetables. At the entrance, a former manager watched for signs of trouble. In booth 42, 3 cameras recorded everything. And at my register, I waited, patient as a spider in the center of a very careful web. Dale reached my booth at 11:17 a.m. I know because the transaction I was completing time-stamped automatically when his shadow fell across my register. He wasn't alone. 2 men I didn't recognize flanked him, wearing the kind of casual clothes that tried too hard to look prosperous. Lena, he said my name like he owned it. We need to discuss this misunderstanding. I'm working. Dale, if you want to buy produce, get in line. Otherwise, move along. He slapped a credit card on my counter. Fine, give me 50 pounds of everything. For the restaurant. What restaurant? Mercer Provisions. We're launching next month. He turned to his companions. My daughter here grows the best organic produce in the valley. Family operation. I picked up the credit card. The name read, Mercer Provisions LLC, the the same fraudulent company from the forged documents. My hand stayed steady as I ran it through the POS system. Declined, I said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Do you have another form of payment? His face reddened. Run it again. I did. The screen flashed the same result, but this time with additional text. Card linked to flagged business entity. Contact issuing bank. Still declined. The system says this business entity has been flagged for suspicious activity. One of his companions shifted uncomfortably. Dale's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw panic flash in his eyes before the anger took over. You're doing this on purpose, he hissed, leaning across my table. Tomatoes trembled in their baskets. Playing your little games. Sir, I need you to step back. Mrs. Fan had materialized beside my booth. Phone already recording. You're disturbing customers. Mind your own business, Dale's voice rose. Several shoppers turned to stare. This is between family. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone. It's between you and law enforcement. That card is linked to a fraudulent business entity created using forged documents, specifically my forged signature. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Dale's companions exchanged glances and began backing away. You can't prove anything, Dale said, but his voice wavered. Can't I? I turned my phone screen toward him. This is the incorporation document for Mercer Provisions, LLC. See the signature. That's supposedly mine. But on April 12th, when this was allegedly signed, I was presenting at the Southeast Compliance Conference in Atlanta. Here's my conference badge, my hotel receipt, and a photo of me on stage at 2:47 p.m., the exact time this document was notarized. More people had gathered. The Saturday market crowd loved drama, and this was better than cable TV. You ungrateful. He started to reach across the table again. Dale, don't. My mother's voice cracked. She stood 10 feet away, clutching a mesh bag of green beans like a lifeline. Please, just go. Janice, control your daughter. Control. I laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Like you controlled her when you made her sign for those certified letters, the ones from Valley First Trust about the fraudulent loan. My mother's face crumpled. Lena, I didn't know. You knew enough. I kept my voice steady, professional. Every word was being recorded by multiple phones now. You signed for letters addressed to me about a loan I never took. That's mail fraud. Mom, federal crime. Dale's fist slammed onto my table. Apples rolled onto the ground. You want to destroy your own family over money. You destroyed this family when you decided to steal my identity. I didn't flinch. And it's not about money, it's about felony forgery, wire fraud, identity theft. Big words from someone who sells vegetables for a living. This person who sells vegetables also runs compliance for Northline Civic Co-op. I investigate fraud for a living. Dale, and you? I smiled coldly. You're not even good at it. That's when he snapped. You lying little, you probably signed those papers and forgot. Always playing victim. Just like when you were... Stop. Noah's voice cut through Dale's rant. My half-brother emerged from the crowd. Phone raised and recording. Choose your next words very carefully. Dale, defamation is also actionable. Dale spun to face him. Who the hell? Noah Pierce, notary public, also the person who verified Lena's real signature for the fraud investigators. He kept recording. And you just admitted, in front of 30 witnesses, that you knew about those papers. The market had gone eerily quiet. Even the children seemed to sense the tension. Dale looked around, finally seeming to realize the scope of his audience. Phones pointed at him from every angle. Mrs. Quinn stood by the entrance, writing in her notebook. Detective Reeves had moved closer, still maintaining her cover but positioned to intervene. This isn't over, Dale said finally. Actually, it is. I pulled out a manila envelope. You've been served. That's a restraining order, a cease and desist for identity theft, and a notice of pending criminal charges. Touch me again. Come to my booth again. Use my name again, you'll be arrested. He looked at the envelope like it might bite him. You can't. I did. And Dale? I leaned forward slightly. Every transaction attempt you make with that fraudulent company is another count. Every time you claim association with my business is defamation. Every step you take in this market while under a restraining order is criminal trespass. His hands shook as he took the envelope. Behind him, my mother silently wept into her green beans. Janice, we're leaving. He turned on his heel. Mom, I called out. She stopped but didn't turn around. The detective wants to talk to you too. Cooperating witnesses get better deals than co-conspirators. She fled then, following Dale through the parting crowd. The market slowly returned to life. Conversations resumed. Children laughed. Commerce continued. But something fundamental had shifted. Well, Mrs. Caffan straightened her flower display. That was educational. I bent to collect the scattered apples, hands finally allowing themselves to tremble. I'm sorry for the disturbance. Don't apologize. She handed me an apple that had rolled to her booth. We all knew Dale Mercer was trouble. Now we know he's also a criminal. Detective Reeves appeared at my shoulder, no longer pretending to shop. That was well done. His admission about those papers, the attempted use of the fraudulent card, the violation of verbal notice to leave, I've got enough for an arrest warrant. He'll be back, I said. He can't help himself. His ego won't let him lose. Good, she smiled grimly. Next time, he won't leave on his own feet. The rest of the market day passed in a blur. Customers offered support. Vendors shared their own Dale encounters. And through it all, the cameras rolled. Every transaction was logged. Every moment documented. Dale thought he'd humiliated me at my own market. Instead, he'd confessed to fraud in front of 36 witnesses and law enforcement. He'd turned my weekend booth into a stage, and I'd given the performance of my life. But I knew this wasn't over. Dale's pride was wounded, his scheme exposed, his control shattered. Desperate men do desperate things. Good thing I'd spent years preparing for exactly that. The cease and desist letter arrived at my office Tuesday morning via process server. Dale was countersuing for defamation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who'd forged my signature was claiming I damaged his reputation by exposing the forgery. This is actually good news, said Patricia Kwan. The attorney Northline's legal department recommended. She scanned the filing with practiced eyes. He's just given us discovery rights. We can subpoena everything bank records, emails, phone logs. He's representing himself, I noted, reading the poorly formatted complaint. Even better. Prosa litigants make crucial mistakes. She tapped a paragraph. Look here. He admits to creating Mercer Provisions LLC, but claims you gave verbal permission. That's impossible to prove and contradicts his earlier denials. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, local area code. Lena Hart. The voice was gravelly, unfamiliar. This is Ray Hart. My father. 15 years of silence broken by Dale's fraud. I'm in town, he continued. Heard you might need some documentation about Dale's previous attempts. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Ray looked older, grayer, but his eyes were sharp as ever. He pushed a folder across the table without preamble. January last year, Dale called claiming you needed a cosigner for a business loan but were too proud to ask. Sent me these documents. I opened the folder, loan applications, signature pages, even a forged letter supposedly from me explaining my financial struggles. The signature was the same 2019 lease copy. But Dale had gotten creative with the letter, piecing together words from various documents to create new sentences. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. You and I haven't talked in years. Lena, figured if you needed help, you'd ask. He sipped his black coffee. But I kept everything. Something felt wrong. The signatures were too perfect. Real signatures vary. These didn't. Would you testify to that? Already gave a statement to Detective Reeves. He studied me across the table. You've done well for yourself. Compliance officer, your own business, despite everything. Despite him leaving, despite Mom's choices, despite it all. The market records showed Dale tried 6 different times to establish vendor credentials using forged documents, I said, steering back to safer ground. Each attempt got more elaborate. He's escalating because he's desperate. Ray pulled out another document. This came last week. He's trying to sell shares in Mercer Provisions to investors, claiming you're a silent partner. Securities fraud. Add it to the list. That afternoon, Mrs. Quinn called with surprising news. Honey, you need to see the vendor application system. Someone tried to access your account last night. The market's IT consultant, David, met us at the office. The login attempts showed a familiar IP address, the same one from the fraudulent loan application. He tried password recovery using your mother's email address. David explained. When that failed, he attempted to use admin credentials from a vendor who left 2 years ago. He's trying to change my banking information, I realized, redirect my vendor payments to his accounts. Already blocked and reported to the FBI's cybercrime division, David assured me. But there's more. He created 3 fake vendor profiles last month, all variations of legitimate businesses. Mrs. Quinn leaned forward. The Millers who sell honey. He made Miller's Honey Farm instead of their real name. Miller Farm Apiaries. Same bank routing number as Mercer Provisions. He was going to intercept their payments. I felt sick. Other people's livelihoods. We've notified all affected vendors, Mrs. Quinn said. They're mad as hornets. Pardon the pun. Tom Miller wants to press additional charges. My phone rang. Patricia. Dale just filed an emergency motion, she said. He wants a restraining order against you, claiming harassment. The hearing is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Let him, just giving him more room to destroy his own credibility. That evening, I found Noah at my apartment with takeout and a flash drive. Gift from the family estate attorney. Apparently, when Grandma died, Dale tried to claim you'd given him power of attorney to handle your inheritance share. I was 19 and hadn't talked to any of them in a year. Exactly. The attorney smelled bullshit, demanded verification. Dale withdrew the claim, but he plugged in the drive. All the documents were preserved, including his attempt to forge your signature on estate papers. 5 years. Dale had been trying to steal from me for 5 years. There's something else, Noah hesitated. I talked to Mom, really talked. She's been documenting things too. Says she'll testify if it keeps her out of jail. She knew. She suspected, but Dale convinced her you'd abandoned the family. That using your credit was justified payback for the pain you caused by leaving. He shook his head. She's in deep. Lena, joint accounts, shared debts. If Dale goes down, she loses everything. I thought about my mother signing for those letters, staying silent while Dale destroyed my credit. Then I thought about the fear in her eyes at the market, the way she clutched those green beans like prayer beads. She made her choice, I said finally. But if she cooperates fully, I won't push for prosecution against her. The next morning, I dressed carefully for court. Professional but not intimidating. Credible but not cold. Patricia had coached me, let him rant. Every word is evidence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Dale sat at the plaintiff's table. Papers scattered like he'd dumped a filing cabinet. He wore his best suit, but nervous sweat had already stained the collar. Your Honor, he began when called. This woman has systematically destroyed my business ventures through false accusations and public humiliation. Judge Margaret Chen, no relation despite the name, listened patiently as Dale rambled through conspiracy theories, family betrayal, and business opportunities I'd supposedly sabotaged. He produced documents, emails, even a rambling manifesto about children's obligations to family. Do you have any evidence of harassment by Ms. Hart? The judge asked finally. She turned the entire farmers market against me. She's poisoned vendors with lies. I asked for evidence, Mr. Mercer, documentation, witnesses. Dale shuffled papers frantically. The defamation speaks for itself. Mr. Mercer, Judge Chen's voice could have frozen fire. I've reviewed your filing. You're seeking a restraining order based on Ms. Hart revealing allegedly forged documents. do you deny forging her signature? She gave permission. Yes or no? Did you sign her name on loan documents? The courtroom held its breath. Dale's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. I was protecting family interests. That's a yes. The judge turned to me. Ms. Hart, your response? Patricia stood smoothly. Your Honor, we have 17 documented instances of identity theft, wire fraud, and attempted securities fraud. Mr. Mercer is using this motion to intimidate a witness in criminal proceedings. We move for dismissal with prejudice. Granted. Mr. Mercer, your motion is denied. Furthermore, the existing restraining order against you remains in effect. Any further frivolous filings will result in contempt charges. Dale exploded. This is conspiracy, you're all. Bailiff, Judge Chen said calmly. As security approached, Dale grabbed his papers and fled, but not before shooting me a look of pure hatred. The mask was completely gone now. What remained was desperate, dangerous, and running out of options. Outside the courthouse, Patricia smiled grimly. He just added witness intimidation to his charges. Beautiful. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. And Dale had just realized his walls weren't closing in, they'd already closed. The only question now was how much damage he'd do in his final thrash. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Unusual for October in Carolina Valley. The market would be slower today, but I came prepared. Rain canopy secured, produce covered, everything in its place. What I hadn't prepared for was the coordinated operation already in motion. At 7 a.m., Detective Reeves called. We have financial crimes investigators on site today, also 2 IRS agents and someone from securities enforcement. Your evidence packages opened multiple investigations. He'll show up, I said, securing a tarp over the tomatoes. He can't help himself. We're counting on it. Plain clothes, strategic positions. Mrs. Quinn gave us the layout. The market opened at 8 vendors, huddling under canopies as sparse customers arrived. I recognized some faces that weren't regulars, a woman examining peppers too intently at booth 15, a man reading the same market map for 10 minutes. At 9:17, Dale appeared at the north entrance. He wasn't alone. 3 men accompanied him, all wearing poorly fitting suits despite the rain. One carried a briefcase. Another held what looked like legal documents wrapped in plastic. Investors, Noah murmured, appearing at my shoulder with coffee. He's still trying to sell shares in the fake company. Dale led his group down aisle C, parallel to mine, gesturing grandly at various booths. His voice carried over the rain's patter. Prime position to corner the organic distribution market. My daughter's connections alone are worth the investment. Your daughter who's filing charges against you, one of the men asked. A misunderstanding, family dispute, already resolved. Dale's laugh was forced. Let me introduce you to some vendors who'll be our suppliers. He approached the Miller's honey stand. Tom Miller took one look and turned his back. Flipping his closed sign, Dale's face reddened, but he moved on. Same result at the next 3 booths. Vendors suddenly too busy to talk. Signs flipping, backs turning. The investors exchanged glances. The briefcase man checked his phone repeatedly. Dale's desperation grew visible. He strode toward the main intersection where aisles A through D met the market's heart, where announcements were made and crowds gathered. He climbed onto an empty crate. Attention, vendors and patrons. His voice boomed. I'm Dale Mercer of Mercer Provisions, soon to be your premier organic distributor. You mean the fraudulent company Tom Miller had found his voice, the one that tried to steal our payments. The one using forged signatures called Esther from the bakery booth. The one that's under federal investigation. That was Detective Reeves, still in character as a shopper but positioned perfectly. Dale's investors began backing away. Briefcase man was actively retreating. Lies, Dale shouted. My stepdaughter. That's when he saw me. I stood at my booth, calm as the eye of a storm. Sorting heirloom carrots like this was any other Sunday. Our eyes met across 30 feet of wet asphalt and watching crowds. He jumped down from the crate and stormed toward aisle A. The investors didn't follow. "You," he snarled, reaching my booth. "You did this. Turned them all against me." "No, Dale. You did this when you forged my signature." I kept sorting carrots. "When you stole my identity. When you hit me in front of witnesses. I made you. You were nothing before I came along." "Stop!" My mother's voice cut through the rain. She stood behind him, soaked and shaking. "Dale, stop, please." "Janice, not now." "Yes, now." She pulled a manila envelope from her jacket. "I'm done. I can't do this anymore." "What are you?" She handed the envelope to Detective Reeves, who had moved closer. "Bank statements, emails, text messages about the forgeries, everything from the last 2 years." Dale went white. "You stupid." He lunged toward my mother. That's when everything happened at once. Security moved first Jorge and 2 off-duty cops in vendor aprons. Dale swung wildly, catching Jorge's shoulder before being wrestled down. He thrashed on the wet asphalt, screaming about betrayal and conspiracy. "Stop resisting." Detective Reeves had her badge out now. All pretense gone. "Dale Mercer, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, assault." "And securities fraud," added one of the plainclothes officers. "SEC has some questions about those investors." "And tax evasion," said another. "IRS would like a word." They cuffed him as he lay in a puddle, rain washing the last of his dignity into the storm drains. Around us, the market held its collective breath. "Additionally," Mrs. Quinn announced, appearing with her ever-present notebook, "Mr. Mercer is hereby permanently banned from Marion Ridge Farmers Market for violations of Sections 3, 7, and 14 of the Vendor Agreement fraud, violence, and conduct detrimental to market operations." She tore the page out and dropped it on Dale's chest as the officers hauled him to his feet. "Lena." He struggled against the cuffs. "You'll regret this. Family doesn't steal from family," I said quietly. "Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't commit fraud." As they led him away, his investors long gone, his schemes collapsing, I heard him muttering about lawyers and lawsuits and appeals. The words faded into the rain until only the market sounds remained. My mother stood frozen, envelope clutched like she'd forgotten she'd already given it away. "Mom," I said. She flinched. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I knew, but I didn't want to know, and I know." I came around the table, put my hand on her soaked shoulder. "But you did the right thing in the end." "Patricia says if I cooperate fully, testify honestly," she trailed off. "You'll be okay. Dale made sure your name wasn't on the worst of it. He needed you clean to use you." I squeezed gently. "Go home. Get warm. Call Patricia tomorrow." She nodded and shuffled away, looking older than her years but somehow lighter too. The market slowly returned to life. Vendors reopened, customers emerged from shelter, and the rain began to ease. I returned to my carrots, hands steady now. "That was something," Noah said, helping me adjust a tarp. "You okay?" "I will be." I watched the police cars disappear into the distance. It's over. The criminal part, maybe, civil suits, restitution hearings, sentencing. He grinned. "You're going to be busy." I thought about the evidence boxes in my apartment, the witnesses lined up to testify, the paper trail that led from a forged signature to federal charges. Dale had tried to steal my identity, but I'd used that same identity compliance officer, market vendor, keeper of meticulous records to destroy him. The sun broke through the clouds, making the wet market shimmer. In booth 42, 3 cameras continued their silent watch. At the entrance, Mrs. Quinn made notes in her eternal notebook. Throughout the market, vendors who'd stood up to a bully went back to selling their wares. And at the intersection of aisles A and D, a puddle marked the spot where Dale Mercer's empire of lies had finally drowned in the truth. The market management had already pressure washed the spot by the time I packed up that afternoon. No trace remained of the morning's drama, except for the stories vendors would tell for years to come. But I kept one photo on my phone, Dale in handcuffs, rain streaming down his face, watching his investors abandon him, not for revenge or satisfaction, but as a reminder, sometimes the best justice is simply letting someone face the consequences of their own choices. The bells on the cash drawer chimed as I closed out the register. Final tally $347 in sales, one forged signature exposed, one fraud ring dismantled, one family secret dragged into daylight. Not bad for a rainy Sunday at the farmer's market. I peeled off my gardening gloves and looked at the bruised heirloom tomatoes scattered across my booth. A few had split when Dale knocked them over during his arrest, their seeds spilling onto the wet asphalt like tiny promises of next season's crop. "Leave them," I told Noah, who had started gathering the damaged produce. "For anyone who needs them." The market was closing now. Vendors packed up their remaining goods, folding tables and rolling carts toward the parking area. The millers stopped by, Tom carrying a jar of honey. "For you," he said gruffly. "Heard what you did making sure he couldn't steal from the rest of us." "Just doing what needed doing," I replied. "No," Esther from the bakery joined us, pressing a sourdough loaf into my hands. "You stood up when it mattered. Dale had a lot of us fooled at first, playing the concerned family man. You showed us who he really was." One by one, vendors stopped by, a bunch of flowers from Mrs. Fan, fresh eggs from the Johnson farm, apple cider from the Heritage Orchard stand. Not payment or pity, just the market taking care of its own. Detective Reeves appeared as I loaded my van. "Thought you should know Dale's trying to make a deal. His lawyer says he'll plead to the federal charges if we drop the state ones." "Will you?" "Not our call, but probably not. The securities fraud alone carries serious time. Add identity theft, wire fraud, assault." She shrugged. "He's looking at 5 to 7 years, minimum." 5 to 7 years. I tried to feel something satisfaction, vindication, even pity, but all I felt was tired. "Your mother's testimony will help," Reeves continued. She brought receipts literally, every forged document, every fraudulent transaction. She'd been building her own insurance file. Of course she had. We were more alike than either of us wanted to admit. I drove home through empty Sunday streets, my van smelling of earth and rain and fresh herbs. In my apartment, I found the evidence boxes still stacked against the wall. Tomorrow, Patricia would collect them for the prosecution. Tonight, they were just cardboard monuments to family dysfunction. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "I'm staying with your aunt in Riverside. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." When I was ready, not when she was ready, not when Dale allowed it. For the first time in years, my mother had made a choice that was entirely her own. I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where this had all started with those fraudulent emails. Outside, Marion Ridge settled into Sunday evening quiet. Somewhere across town, Dale sat in a federal holding cell, his empire of lies reduced to a case number. My mother sheltered with family she'd neglected for a toxic marriage. And me, I opened my laptop and began typing. Vendor Incident Report. Final summary date, October 15th, 2023. Reporting vendor, Lena Hart. Shade and soil, incident status resolved. Dale Mercer has been permanently removed from market premises following arrest on multiple federal and state charges. All fraudulent vendor accounts have been identified and frozen. Affected vendors have been notified and assisted with security updates. Market operations have returned to normal. Recommendation. This incident highlights the importance of our existing verification systems. No changes needed to current protocols, they worked exactly as designed. I signed it, attached the security footage stills, and hit send. Let the official record show that the Marion Ridge Farmers Market protected its own. My shoulder still ached. My ribs bore bruises that would take weeks to fade. But as I made tea and watched the sun set over Carolina Valley, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine peace. Dale had thought the market was neutral territory, a place where he could exercise power without consequence. He'd never understood that it was actually a community, dozens of small business owners who looked out for each other, who verified signatures and checked references and kept careful records. He'd tried to steal my identity, but identity isn't just a signature on a page. It's the work you do, the relationships you build, the reputation you earn one honest transaction at a time. Those things can't be forged. My phone rang. Noah? Hey, you'll never guess who called me, he said. 3 investors who want to know if you're interested in actually starting a legitimate organic distribution company. Turns out Dale's pitch was solid, he just forgot the part about not committing fraud. I laughed, surprising myself. Tell them I already have a business. It involves dirt and dawn, and occasionally dealing with pests. That's enough excitement for me. Fair enough. Sunday dinner next week. Yeah, maybe somewhere other than Mom's house this time. After we hung up, I stood on my small balcony and breathed in the October air. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and depositions and the slow grind of justice. But tonight, I had fresh bread and local honey, a business that was truly mine, and the knowledge that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it's just standing in your own booth, selling your own produce, and refusing to let anyone steal who you've worked so hard to become. I picked up one of the split tomatoes I'd brought home, studying its exposed seeds. Next season, these would grow into new plants. The cycle would continue. And Dale Mercer. He'd be nothing but a cautionary tale vendors told while setting up their booths in the early morning light. I went inside and closed the door on more than just the evening air. Tomorrow, the Marion Ridge Farmers Market would open as usual. Booth 34 would be ready with fresh produce and fair prices. And the woman running it would be exactly who she claimed to be, nothing more, nothing less, and certainly nothing stolen. The cash drawer had chimed its last song for Dale Mercer's schemes, but for honest vendors and loyal customers, the market bells would ring on, clear and true as morning rain on heirloom tomatoes. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Share thoughts about family, justice, and standing up for what's right. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button. And if you really want to help others discover this tale of sweet revenge served at a farmer's market, hit the hype button to boost this video. Your support means everything and helps these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. Until next time, stay strong and keep good records.